The Interfaith Forum of South Africa will convene a three-day conference to run from the 9th to the 11th of October to chart a solution to what they call a declining state of affairs in South Africa. The conference at the Birchwood Hotel in Ekurhuleni will zone in on the rolling blackouts, water shortages, crumbling infrastructure, high rate of unemployment, a tanking economy, fraud and corruption, and the high cost of living. Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, who's the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, now joins us for more on this discussion, and he joins us via our video link. Bishop, thank you so much for joining us this evening here on the late edition.
Thank you very much for having us, ma'am.
Yes. And Bishop, of course, we understand that as the Interfaith Forum of South Africa, you will be convening a conference next week. And of course, we understand that it will be a three-day engagement. Perhaps tell us more about this. What's the significance of you convening and having this conference?
Well, first of all, the Interfaith Forum is really exactly that. Interfaith is made up of diverse faith leaders from the Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, Nazareta, and Council of African Independent Churches, the Evangelical Alliance, and the Charismatic International Federation of Christian Churches, as well as the Bantu Church of Christ. So it's really just a coming together of a number of faith communities, and of course the South African Council of Churches, which I represent. We have been concerned for some time about the state of affairs and wondered what should then be our kind of intervention in this environment. There are three things that were, this is why we got a three-day conference. First of all, we're dealing with the kind of statehood, if you like, what makes for a capable state, what solutions, what suggestions can be made that hopefully can take us out of what clearly is a difficult morass to get out of. And the second one is about the economic, the reality of what we call the excluded majority from the economy. What kind of economic architecture will ensure that somebody who was otherwise in a poor community in Bushbuck Ridge, in Mara, in Limpopo, Bampierstad, in Northwest, wherever they are, can find a hope that they can live with. And the reality that we've got between the ages 15 and 24, no less than 8 million young people who are without hope. And that is 75% to 80% of young people who are without hope. What can we do to make sure that this is taken care of in a way that meets our pastoral concerns as religious communities? And then, of course, we want to talk about that beyond that is the third day that focuses on what makes for a common South African nationhood with the kinds of things that and that we can all hold on together and feel that we can emotionally hold on together as one community and not have this kind of legacy of apartheid, which clearly is now our monument of apartheid. The division in terms of race and ethnicity, which if now political parties seem to be very comfortable with, because those are their fishing ponds for votes, lie in our dividedness.
And Bishop, you know, when you look at your statement and, you know, what you will be doing over the next 3 days, I mean, we know that you've highlighted the various problems we are facing in this country, and we continue to grapple with a number of those challenges. How will you ensure that when you discuss these interventions, that they will impact society on the ground and they will be felt immediately so that solutions are found to the problems we continue to face in this country?
Of course, we are not government. We're not going to implement so much as to find solutions that we will drive and promote. And hopefully, you know, if everybody will see that these are worthwhile, and they will probably, who knows, may even demand them of their politicians and say, if you don't want to deliver on this, I'm sorry, you don't have my vote.
And certainly, when you speak about you also not being government, one would say that once you are done discussing these interventions, how soon will you then be approaching government? Because we also know that we're heading to elections next year, and this government that you might be speaking to might even change. So, how soon will you try to speak to those at the union buildings to ensure that these solutions that we need in this country, especially for young people, to give them that sense of hope that it is indeed found?
We are respectful of the processes of our democratic process of our country, and for that reason, we are inviting political leaders to join the first opening session of our time, so that they have a sense, and this is really an invitation to all political parties, particularly those that are in parliament, so that they have a sense of what it is, so that when we come back to them and say, you know what, we asked you to come and listen to the beginning of that process, that's where it is now, these are the outcomes, these are the proposals, we should be ready to discuss them with all these political parties. That our view is that all of them should get to hear, because this is everybody, this is our country, our responsibility. Actually, that's the tagline. It says, our country, our responsibility, from awareness to action, so that every South African should feel they have a responsibility to drive what comes out of these processes.
Bishop, you've invited political parties to be part of this conference. Who else is going to be part of this conference?
No. Political parties are only invited to the opening session.
Yeah.
Because the discussions are not theirs, they're ours. They are the ordinary South Africans who will have been invited. But also, of course, we also asked, remember, and I can just give you the South African Council of Churches alone. The member churches of the SACC, I'm talking about, I'm not saying everybody goes to church, but if you were to just go by the names of people that are in our congregations in terms of our books, in all the member churches of the SACC, you're looking at between 20 and 23 million people. And now, of course, I won't mention what, if you think about Abagwashembe, if you think about all the other, all the other churches, the Catholics, the Methodists, the Presbyterians, all these congregations. And then, of course, you talk about the Muslims and the Jews and the Hindus, and all these churches and these faith communities come together. They really are millions. So in a sense, when you have even a smattering of us gathering together next week, we will be speaking for millions. And that's what we want to make sure is understood.
Yeah, and why is it so important to the South African Council of Churches and, of course, the Interfaith Forum of South Africa to come together and to discuss these problems and to seek for these solutions that we need in the country?
Maybe if I took a step back to say that our close cooperation and collaboration actually strengthened during the COVID time, when we had what we call the Religious Forum Against COVID. We shared the pains of our congregations. We shared ideas of how to save our congregations. We partnered in significant ways. But you can imagine how hurtful it was to hear that in the midst of this, some people were stealing money that is intended to save lives. And we said, this is like somebody actually grabbing the oxygen off somebody from a ventilator and they die. And that's how we felt. And that's when we began to look at just what is the nature of our society at this time, but what are the things that ought to happen that are not happening, that make for a better society for all. And then we broadened our analysis. And that's why we said, look, if we don't make our contribution, then we have nobody to blame.
All right, then, Bishop, thank you so much for your time here in the late edition. That is Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, who is the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, just giving us his insight when it comes to that 3-day conference that will be taking place in Ekurhuleni next week. At the same time, you heard him there saying that political parties are invited, but they will not form part of the conference.